I do not typically engage with specific websites dedicated to adult entertainment, but there was one particular evening in July a few months ago that shifted my routine dramatically. On that night, I found myself not only browsing their content, but also opting to sign up for a premium membership. The membership fee of $100 seemed reasonable, considering that I was about to indulge in a unique experience. As I tuned into a live stream, I was greeted by the sight of an attractive woman. Although I had encountered more captivating performers in the past, something about this particular scene struck a chord deep within me. The woman introduced as Hot Housewife Jenna caught my attention, but I was well aware that her real name was Kelly, my wife. As the live stream progressed, it became clear that there was an undeniable chemistry between Kelly and her male partner in the performance. After an intimate moment, he teased her playfully, saying, "Well, darling, that was quite enjoyable. I bet your husband can't make you happy like that, can he?" Kelly, donning the persona of Hot Housewife Jenna, responded with a smile that exuded both charm and confidence. "Well, Mario, that was indeed enjoyable," she said, "but just so you know, no one ignites my passion like my husband. I've been with a few men, but none of them make me as happy as he does. You're good, but he's incredible. So don't stop trying harder." Mario, taken aback by her words, prodded further, asking, "If he's so fantastic, then why are you cheating on him by being here and letting me be with you?" Kelly maintained her grin as she replied, "I didn't plan for it to happen, but I enjoy the excitement. I'm glad you're part of it. I also do it because I can get away with it, and he'll never find out. I truly love my husband with all my heart, and after 3 nights here, I've realized how much better he is than what I get here. It makes me love and appreciate him even more." Reflecting on the $100 I had spent, it became evident that I had gained invaluable insight into my beloved wife's hidden escapades without the need for expensive surveillance or private investigators. You may be curious about how I ended up in this unusual situation. It is indeed a valid question. The most sincere answer I can provide is that it was a twist of fate, not in the sense of chance that my wife was involved with someone like Mario, but rather in the fortunate occurrence that I became aware of her infidelity. Kelly and I have shared a marriage spanning just over 8 years. Our initial meeting dates back to our elementary school days in a small town in central Illinois. She resided in the heart of the town, while I lived in the rural countryside. Our families were intricately connected through business. Her father owned the largest grain elevator in the area, while my father ran the largest grain farm. Given our familial ties and shared interests, it was only natural for us to cross paths frequently, attend the same schools, and eventually cultivate a friendship. I won't bore you with the details of our childhood crushes, teenage romances, or even the ups and downs of our college lives. Both of us dated others and explored relationships with different people, and while we had not committed to each other exclusively during those times, I suspect we both always knew that we were meant to be together. I was her first love, and though there were others along the way for both of us, it was during our junior year at the University of Illinois that we made the decision to become exclusive. A year and a half later, I proposed to her, and just a week after we graduated, we celebrated our wedding day. Both of us earned degrees in business administration, and I believed that our life together was perfect, until that fateful night in July. To provide a broader context, 3 years prior, Kelly's parents retired and relocated to Phoenix, Arizona. Kelly, along with her sister Amber and brothers Tom and Carl Gentry, acquired a 48% stake in the grain business from their father, Tom Sr. He wished to retain a controlling interest for a few years to aid in their financial development, with plans to gradually decrease his involvement until they owned the business entirely. Amber is married to Walter Swanson, known affectionately as Wally, who manages a farm that is slightly smaller than mine. We live in proximity to each other and enjoy spending time together as families. Tom and Carl jointly oversee the grain business, while Kelly assumes the role of controller, managing financial operations. Amber is actively involved on the ground, dealing with customers and managing grain sales transactions. Together, they run a truly family-operated business, supported by a small team of employees, primarily consisting of truck drivers and grain handlers. During the peak harvest season, it is common practice for agricultural businesses to hire a few part-time workers to help manage the increased workload. This is particularly essential for farms that operate on a larger scale, where the number of crops being harvested demands additional hands. While this provides sufficient context regarding the operations of the farm, it is crucial to transition now to a deeply personal and unfortunate experience I encountered involving my wife. What began as a typical season took a drastic turn when I discovered that my wife was engaging with another man online. The events that unfolded after this revelation were both shocking and heart-wrenching. At the time, all four of the Gentry children were intensely focused on finalizing the purchase of their father's grain business. Although I was not directly involved in the day-to-day negotiations, I was aware of the amount of effort they were investing to bring the deal to fruition. Their dedication involved multiple meetings with various stakeholders, including banks, the Illinois Department of Agriculture, and insurers. The entire process exhausted them, but thankfully, it coincided with the winter months, which is generally a slower period for agricultural operations. For me, the aftermath of the harvest season meant that I didn't require my wife Kelly's assistance on the farm as much as I usually did during busier times of the year. My responsibilities revolved around managing 2,200 acres of corn and soybeans, which naturally demanded my full attention and left little room for distractions. Though Kelly did not directly participate in the farming activities, she played a vital role in running errands and managing various tasks that were essential for the smooth operation of the farm. Since our schedules were less hectic during this time, Kelly decided to treat herself and her friend Amber to a spa getaway. They booked a 3-night retreat, which allowed them both to relax and unwind away from the stresses of daily life. After their time at the spa, the two women returned feeling rejuvenated and eager to repeat the experience in July, once the planting season had concluded. They scheduled another weekend at the spa for the following year, anticipating another enjoyable retreat. However, it was during this particular visit that I stumbled upon an unsettling discovery that would change everything. Dan Marvel, a field agent for the Illinois Department of Agriculture in our county, stopped by our farm during a routine inspection. Dan and I had known each other since our college days, and when he casually inquired about Kelly, I mentioned that she was away on a getaway at PE Spa. His expression shifted to one of concern, and he cryptically mentioned that something unusual was happening there, something that warranted my attention. Dan went on to explain that a cousin of his had previously worked at the spa as a masseuse and had shared some rather scandalous stories about the goings-on within its walls. Although he hesitated to provide specifics, he suggested that I look into a website with a name that seemed to be connected to PE Spa. Intrigued and somewhat unsettled by his comments, I decided to investigate further. As someone who enjoys exploring the depths of the internet for interesting content, I later found myself delving into this mystery that evening. With relative ease, I stumbled upon PE Spa and uncovered a live feed that promised a view into the hidden activities occurring there. While recounting the events of that night is painful, I must acknowledge the emotional turmoil I experienced upon making my discovery. The feelings of hurt, betrayal, anger, and depression swept over me like a whirlwind, as one can only imagine the complex emotions a person goes through when faced with infidelity. What I had discovered was not a singular act of betrayal, rather, it became painfully clear that this was not the first time Kelly had crossed that line. Accessing the archives section of the website revealed videos of her past visits, including footage from the 2 previous weekends she had spent at the spa, as well as videos recorded during the recent trip with Amber. With a premium membership, I found that I had the option to download videos for an additional fee. It was a decision that filled me with dread, but I felt compelled to gather concrete evidence. I ultimately downloaded 8 videos, spending a total of $260 to obtain them. The cost was nothing compared to the gravity of the situation. With this evidence in my hands, I felt a sense of clarity about the steps I needed to take. I had video proof of my wife's interactions with at least 2 different men, Mario and Steve, during those visits. The details of how many more men may have been involved were irrelevant. Knowing that 2 were enough to shatter our relationship was all that mattered. I meticulously created several DVD copies of the videos and stored them safely within a wall safe constructed by my father when he built our house. This safe was cleverly concealed behind a hidden panel in the built-in bookcase in my office, ensuring the security of my evidence. Once I tucked the copies away securely, I made it a priority to erase all traces of my discovery from my computer. I deleted the original files and removed any references to Nature's Pleasure Spa from my digital life. The weight of my discoveries loomed heavily over me. I knew that the time had come to act decisively. I would not delay in taking steps toward separation. The sooner I initiated the process, the better I felt it would be for my emotional well-being. Aside from the DVD copies I had discreetly hidden away, there was no longer any tangible evidence of what had transpired between Kelly and me. With everything sorted and organized, I felt a sense of grim determination wash over me. I picked up my cell phone and my fingers moved quickly over the screen, crafting a message for Kelly. Kelly, this is Jack. I happen to know exactly what you're doing at P Spas, and I have evidence to prove it. Don't bother returning to the house if you decide to come back at all. this house is no longer your home, and soon I won't be your husband. We're done. My lawyer will get in touch with you in the next few days to arrange for you to collect your personal belongings. At that moment, it appeared that Kelly had turned off her cell phone, as my message went unacknowledged until the next morning. Despite not receiving any response from her that night, I prepared myself for whatever might come next. Early the following day, my phone began to ring incessantly. I glanced at the caller ID and saw it was Kelly. I made the decision not to answer, choosing instead to let it ring out. Shortly afterward, a voicemail notification chimed in. "Jack, what on earth are you talking about? Honey, I have no idea what's going on there, but why would you send me such terrible messages? Amber and I are packing up now, and I'll be home in a couple of hours. I don't understand what you think I did, but you're mistaken. I'll talk to you when I get there, and then we can sort this out. I love you." Not long after, my phone rang again, displaying her number once more. Again, I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was almost identical to the first, leaving me to wonder if she had rehearsed what she wished to say when I ignored her call. A new text message soon arrived, which echoed her previous sentiments, as if she were a broken record playing the same tune. Since I preferred not to engage in a conversation with her at that moment, I opted to respond with a concise text, acknowledging her messages but reiterating my decision not to speak with her directly. "I wonder if Mario would have any idea what in the world you're talking about, honey. If I asked him, why don't you have him call me? I will ask him what I said about not coming back to the house. I meant, do not think you can come home. It's over, Kelly." The silence that followed was deafening. I did not receive any more texts from her. Later that afternoon, however, I found my phone ringing yet again. It was Kelly, leaving another voicemail. "Jack, we need to talk. I'm staying with Amber until you and I can have a conversation and resolve this terrible misunderstanding. Please call my cell phone and talk to me." The following morning, I took proactive measures by visiting my bank to set up a second safe deposit box solely in my name. Within that box, I carefully placed one copy of the incriminating DVDs, along with the original prenuptial agreement. I had also prepared an extra copy of the prenuptial agreement, just to be safe, as I had a meeting with my lawyer scheduled for 11 a.m. Although I was confident that my lawyer already possessed the necessary documentation, I didn't want to leave anything to chance. When the time came for my meeting, I walked into my lawyer's office, only to find that Kelly was already there. She looked disheveled, with her eyes puffy from crying and her hair in disarray. "Jack, we need to discuss this," she said, her tone a mix of urgency and desperation. Intrigued and frustrated, I asked her, "How did you know I had an appointment here?" She replied, "Richard called me when you set up the meeting." At that moment, Richard Warner, my attorney, emerged from his office, inviting both of us into his workspace. My anger simmered just beneath the surface, and I interjected, "No, Richard, we won't be going into your office together. Your call to Kelly has shattered my trust, and I need a clear answer from you right now. Will you represent me only?" Lawyers are expected to be astute, but it appeared that Richard had overlooked a critical aspect of ethics and loyalty. His response was less than favorable as he stated, "No, Jack, if this continues, I will be representing Kelly." It became clear to me that he viewed the grain business as a more lucrative opportunity than my farming enterprise. This revelation left me seething, as I suspected his ties to the Gentry family, who were entrenched in the grain business, might have influenced his decision-making. I held firmly to the belief that he would eventually come to realize the grave error in his judgment, and it came to choosing sides in our increasingly complicated situation. "Richard, I need to make sure that all the original documents I provided, along with any available copies of contracts and relevant paperwork, are in your possession and ready for me by 4 p.m. today. I will either come by to pick them up personally or arrange for a courier service to collect them on my behalf. I want to take a moment to express my appreciation for the work you've done for me in the past. However, I must emphasize that you are making a serious mistake in this situation. As a result of this, I will be seeking legal representation elsewhere, and my new attorney will be in touch with you shortly." During this tense exchange, Kelly remained silent at first but then interjected with a pleading tone, asking, "Jack, why won't you talk to me now to clear this up?" I responded, "Because, Kelly, it's clear that Richard values you as a client more than he values me. I cannot have this conversation without legal representation, and I do not trust him." Richard quickly interjected, saying, "Jack, you know I have always been straightforward with you, so there's nothing to fear." In my mind, I thought, "Oh Richard, I have plenty to fear. The saying goes, you can't serve two masters, and it seems that you've already made your choice regarding priorities. Your previous actions, like calling Kelly into this meeting, have shown me that I cannot trust you. I concluded firmly, goodbye, my attorney will be in touch, and as I left the office, I could hear Kelly starting to cry again. Now, I was faced with the task of finding a new attorney. I had heard good things about David Warner, a skilled attorney known for his competitive nature, especially when dealing with Richard. I thought he might be a good choice, but I didn't want to rush into anything without doing my due diligence. It is crucial to choose professionals like attorneys, accountants, bankers, and insurance agents carefully, as they often handle sensitive information. I knew that the relationship between a client and attorney is significant and built on trust. To ensure I made a well-informed decision, I reached out to David's law office, asking if they could provide me with a list of references. The secretary informed me that they indeed had a list and would be happy to send it to me via email. Upon reviewing the list, I noticed that 4 of my friends had used his services, so I decided to visit 3 of them to get their feedback on David's work. It didn't take long for all 3 to give enthusiastic recommendations, assuring me that he would handle my case effectively. I chose to skip the 4th friend, Wally, because he is married to Amber, who happens to be Kelly's sister, and I didn't want to complicate things further. After gathering the endorsements, I called David's office again, introducing myself and requesting to schedule a meeting with him for after 4 p.m. The receptionist informed me that he would be unavailable until 4:30 p.m. but would check his schedule to see if he could make time for me afterward. I knew there was a possibility he might not be free, but I felt it was worth the attempt. When she returned, she confirmed that Mr. Warner could meet with me at 4:30 p.m., but it would need to be a brief meeting as he had other commitments later in the evening. I agreed to this arrangement and mentioned that I would arrive shortly before our scheduled time. She responded, I look forward to seeing you at that time, Mr. Hagen. By the way, my name is Samantha, and I am David's wife. At 4 p.m., I stopped by Richard's office to collect my paperwork. However, it quickly became clear that they had not finished copying everything. It felt as though they were intentionally stalling, likely hoping I would reconsider my decision. Frustration boiled over, and I lost my temper, insisting that they provide me with every piece of my legal paperwork within the next 15 minutes. I threatened that if they failed to do so, my new attorney would be reaching out to them, which certainly caught their attention. They inquired about who my new attorney would be, and I simply replied that they would find out soon enough. Almost immediately, the atmosphere in the office shifted, and I noticed several staff members scrambling to make copies. Within 20 minutes, I finally had every document in hand. With my paperwork secured, I headed off to David's office for my appointment, still managing to make it on time despite the earlier delays. During our meeting, David agreed to take me on as both my personal and business attorney. After discussing the logistics, I asked if I could leave all the documentation I had gathered with him for safekeeping, and he kindly consented to store it in his vault, giving me peace of mind as I navigated this new chapter in my legal affairs. We agreed to meet the next day, Tuesday at 9 a.m., to go through all the paperwork and put together a plan for my divorce. When I left the office at 5:30 p.m., I turned to Samantha and asked, So, am I causing you any trouble, or are your evening plans still good to go? She smiled warmly and replied, You did just fine, Mr. Hagen. Our evening is still on track. I wish all our clients were as punctual as you've been. But please, call me Sam from now on. I nodded and responded, Thank you, Sam. Please call me Jack. The following morning, we dived into my business paperwork and contracts. While I can't share the specifics due to attorney-client privilege, I will say that David felt everything was well organized from a business standpoint. We took a break for lunch, during which David and Sam invited me to join them at a local diner. I accepted their invitation, as I needed to stop by my bank before we resumed in the afternoon. At the diner, the atmosphere was enjoyable, and I found myself having a pleasant meal with this charming couple. I learned that they were both a few years older than me, and David mentioned that he had attended school with Tom Gentry. However, their relationship hadn't developed into a close friendship, likely due to the competitive nature they shared. Sam shared that they had been married for about 10 years and had 2 daughters, aged 6 and 3. They proudly showed me pictures, and it was clear that the girls took after their mother, both possessing beautiful smiles that reminded me of Sam's. This lunch turned out to be quite beneficial for me. It helped ease my transition into this new attorney-client relationship. However, amidst the warmth of their company, a feeling of sadness washed over me. Seeing David and Sam together reminded me of happier times with Kelly before her affair was revealed. I fought back tears several times during our lunch, and while David seemed oblivious, I noticed Sam's expression changed to one of concern as she picked up on my emotional struggle. After our meal, I headed over to the bank to make some adjustments to protect my assets. I also took the opportunity to obtain a $5,000 check made out to David Warner Law Offices as a retainer for their upcoming work. Though David hadn't asked for it yet, I thought it would be a considerate gesture on my part. I returned to the office around 1:30 p.m. feeling ready to continue our meeting. Sam informed me that David was on the phone and guided me to the small conference room where we had been meeting. She kindly asked if I wanted coffee or anything else, but I declined, saying I was fine. Sam took a seat beside me in one of the chairs and extended her hand. David didn't fill me in on the details, Jack, but I can sense from your demeanor during lunch that there's something significant going on. I noticed you're wearing a wedding ring, so I assume it relates to your wife. If you're comfortable, I'd like to ask David if I can join the discussion this afternoon as we address whatever you need to share with us. I was teetering on the edge of another emotional breakdown, so I just nodded in agreement. My anger had faded for the moment, and all that remained was the hurt, which felt more pronounced. Having Sam there was oddly reassuring, as her natural sensitivity seemed to fit the moment perfectly. During the meeting, I recounted the painful story of discovering Kelly's infidelity. There were moments when I broke down, and Sam was quick to step in with sympathy and comfort, helping me regain my composure. Once I had collected myself, I outlined my intentions clearly. Unless something drastically changed my mind, I was planning to file for divorce and enforce the terms of the prenuptial agreement. David and I then delved into a thorough review of the prenuptial agreement, which essentially stated the following: I would retain 100% ownership of all farm assets, real estate, and personal property, while Kelly would maintain 100% ownership of the grain business assets. If it were determined that there had been no infidelity on her part, Kelly would be entitled to 50% of our financial assets. However, should infidelity be proven, Kelly would only receive $25,000 for each year of her unfaithfulness, rather than the full 50%. I also received $225,000 for each year of infidelity, rather than a 50% division of household personal property, which remains equal regardless of the circumstances. David questions my need to present any evidence of the alleged infidelity. In response, I explain that I do possess the evidence, but I am not willing to disclose it at this time or to anyone else unless absolutely necessary for a court hearing. If that situation arises, I would present it to the judge. Despite my explanation, David continues to press, emphasizing the importance of verifying the infidelity claims. I reassure him, explaining that he needs to trust my judgment in this matter. I acknowledge that I have the evidence but also express my concern for Kelly, stating that I do not want anyone else to witness what I have seen unless it becomes absolutely necessary. Sam, sensing the tension, places a supportive hand on David's arm and nods in agreement. Eventually, David relents, albeit reluctantly. In the days that follow, Kelly reaches out to me multiple times, leaving a series of phone calls and voicemail messages. I choose not to answer her calls and delete the voicemails without listening to their content, wanting to maintain my distance. David stays in touch as well, informing me that we have a scheduled meeting for Thursday that will involve myself, Kelly, David, and Richard. I plan to use this meeting to ask Kelly some crucial questions, with her responses ultimately determining whether I proceed with the divorce and the grounds on which I base my decision. I brace myself for the upcoming confrontation, curious about how events will unfold on Thursday at 10:30 a.m. When the day arrives, David and I arrive at Richard's office for the meeting with Kelly. Upon our arrival, I notice that Kelly's car is already in the parking lot, which adds a layer of anticipation to the situation. We walk into the office, and Richard's assistant leads us to a small conference room where we wait patiently for a few minutes. Soon after, Richard and Kelly join us. To my surprise, Kelly appears markedly better than the last time I had seen her at Richard's office earlier in the week. It is clear that she has made a concerted effort to present herself well for this meeting. She looks beautiful, and I struggle to keep my feelings hidden. I don't want her to notice the extent to which I still care for her, so I try to maintain a neutral demeanor. As we settle in, Kelly offers me a warm smile and says, "Jack, I hope we can finally talk and clear up this misunderstanding. I miss you and want to come home." Her words hang heavily in the air, and I find myself at a loss for a response. I fear that if I speak, my voice might betray the tumult of emotions swirling within me. I know I need to maintain control over my feelings. It is a challenge, but it is necessary. David, sensing the potential for a reconciliation, speaks up, stating that we are here to discuss the divorce proceedings and how to move forward as a young couple. Richard nods, adding that Kelly believes this situation is a big misunderstanding and is eager to resolve the issues with me. At that moment, I feel a rising tide of anger rekindled within me. Richard, unaware of the personal struggle I am enduring, inadvertently stirs the emotions I had been trying to contain. The anger makes it easier for me to manage the hurt and disappointment I feel toward Kelly. I gather my composure and agree that it is acceptable for Richard's client to communicate with her husband. I focus my attention on Kelly and begin, "Kelly, here are the facts. When we got married, we signed a prenuptial agreement. We updated it 2 years ago when you joined your father's business, and I have brought copies of the updated agreement for everyone to review." I notice a look of surprise on Kelly's face, and she responds quietly, "But Jack, I don't want a divorce. I want to be your wife. Why can't we just move past this misunderstanding and go home to be happy again?" I somewhat brush past her comments, feeling the weight of my resolve. I continue, "Our intention was to protect our individual interests while still enjoying the benefits of our marriage. Initially, the prenuptial agreement was established to safeguard my family's assets for generations. After you joined your father's business, it became crucial to protect those assets as well. I explain that the agreement is crystal clear. I will retain 100% of the assets from my family, and you will retain 100% of the assets from your family. Furthermore, any debts related to our respective business assets will be solely the responsibility of the respective party, ensuring that neither of us is liable for the other's financial obligations. I emphasize that our partnership should be equitable, allowing us both to pursue our interests without the complications arising from a potential divorce. The agreement we have established provides a clear framework for dividing our financial assets and property in the event of a divorce, taking into account various circumstances that may arise. This document explicitly states how we will handle the distribution of our wealth and personal belongings. According to our arrangement, you are entitled to retain all personal items that are uniquely yours, such as your clothing, jewelry, your vehicle, and other possessions that typically do not relate to a man's interests. Similarly, I hold the same rights to my personal belongings. When it comes to non-farm personal property, which encompasses items like furniture, artwork, electronics, and other household goods, we have agreed that these will be divided equally between us, ensuring fairness in the separation of our shared lives. However, there are specific provisions regarding farm-related property. Essential tools and machinery, including grain bins and farming equipment, will remain entirely under my ownership, as they are critical to the ongoing farming operation. In terms of financial settlements resulting from a divorce, the baseline arrangement stipulates that you would receive 50% of our total assets if infidelity is not a factor. Nevertheless, two notable exceptions arise if infidelity is involved. Should you choose to initiate the divorce due to my infidelity, the financial compensation for you would be limited to $25,000 yearly, culminating in a total of $200,000, rather than the standard 50%. Conversely, if I am the one to file for divorce due to your infidelity, the financial arrangement shifts in my favor, resulting in a distribution of $225,000 per year, also totaling $200,000, and again deviating from the standard 50%. As we move forward, I have a series of questions I need to pose to you, Kelly. Your responses will not only influence whether I decide to proceed with the divorce but also determine the grounds on which I do so, which will ultimately impact the financial settlements we will receive. If there is any hope for us to salvage our marriage, I require absolute honesty in your answers. Should you refuse to engage, or if I catch you in a lie, the opportunity for reconciliation will be irrevocably lost. Do you understand the gravity of this situation? Are you committed to answering truthfully to give our marriage a fighting chance? Upon hearing the details of our prenuptial agreement, Kelly appeared taken aback, yet she quickly composed herself and expressed her willingness to be forthcoming. She affirmed her love for me and her desire to preserve our marriage, promising to do whatever it takes to resolve this situation and return home. At this point, I propose to record our conversation for clarity and future reference. Kelly hesitated briefly, seeking counsel from Richard, who had remained mostly silent until then. Richard, embodying the role of a typical lawyer, warned against the idea of recording but ultimately left the decision in Kelly's hands. My lawyer, David, echoed this sentiment, advising her against recording but emphasizing that the primary focus should be on convincing me, rather than worrying about legal advice. Kelly, determined to untangle the current misunderstanding, ultimately consented to the recording. With the tape recorder positioned on the table to capture the upcoming dialogue, I began explaining the nature of my questions. I intended to address her fidelity, categorizing the inquiry into 3 distinct time frames. The first time frame spanned from the moment we committed to exclusivity up until our engagement. When queried about her faithfulness during that initial period, Kelly responded positively, with a smile indicating her loyalty. However, I quickly noted that her response was inaccurate, marking it as the first instance of dishonesty. The smile on her face faded into shock as I indicated that I had considered leaving at that moment but chose to remain and press further. As we continued, I confronted Kelly about an intimate encounter she had with Larry Evandale 2 days after we had mutually agreed to be exclusive. I explained that Larry, known for his propensity to boast, had revealed that she had invited him over while her parents were away, leading to a private encounter in her bedroom. He had claimed that their connection was significant enough for him to anticipate future rendezvous, even after our marriage. I mentioned that Amber had overheard their conversation, providing me with some reassurance that Kelly loved me and wouldn't stray again, which led her to urge me to avoid making any hasty decisions. While I acknowledged that Kelly's initial dishonesty was troubling, I also understood the reasons behind her actions, even if I did not condone them. I decided to let her off the hook for that instance but made it clear that there would be no further allowances for dishonesty in our discussions. From that point onward, I expected complete transparency, as further deceit would carry serious consequences. Continuing the conversation, I explained that due to the earlier incident, I had spent the following 6 months closely monitoring her actions, driven by a deep-seated mistrust. During that period, she managed to avoid raising any red flags, leading me to a point where I felt comfortable enough to propose to her. I handed her the ring she was wearing, a symbol that carried both promise and hesitation. I recognized that she might have wished for it sooner, but trust is not something that could be rushed. I explained that I needed time to build my confidence in her, so she had to be patient. It was a difficult position to be in, but I wasn't ready to give my heart completely without certainty. Then I moved on to the crucial second question that had been weighing heavily on my mind, whether she had cheated on me during our engagement, from the moment she received the ring until our wedding day. Without any hesitation, she firmly said no, absolutely not. It was the answer I expected, yet I still felt a flicker of uncertainty. I conveyed to her that, despite my doubts, I wanted to believe her. My trust was still shaky, and it had taken a lot for me to get to the point where I felt I could trust her. I admitted that I had been quietly observing her throughout that year, holding my breath, hoping for reassurance. I expressed my belief that she had indeed been faithful during that time, but the shadow of doubt lingered in the back of my mind. Richard, to his credit, suggested that we take a break. He recognized that the conversation had taken an emotional toll on Kelly, who had grown visibly distressed while I discussed Larry Evandale. Her eyes welled up, and she was on the brink of breaking down. Richard proposed that we pause to allow her time to regain her composure before we continued, and so we decided to break for lunch. David and I picked up Sam, and we all headed to the local diner, where the Blue Plate special awaited us. During lunch, Sam turned to me and asked how things were going. David chimed in, saying he thought I was holding up reasonably well, noting that not much had emerged from our earlier discussion but that I had laid the groundwork for an honest conversation about the time they were married. He pointed out that if Kelly chose to confess everything, I might still consider divorce, but he could see that she genuinely wanted to salvage our marriage. He acknowledged it would be a tough decision, but he believed I had the strength to navigate it. Of course, he warned that if she lied, I would be left with the daunting task of figuring out how to proceed. Sam looked at me with understanding, sensing the weight of my pain. I mustered a weak smile and remarked about how incredibly tough this situation was. I pondered aloud about why people engage in such foolish actions that lead to pain, not just for themselves but for those they love as well. Sam placed her hand over mine, and it felt comforting. She said if only we had the power to give people a wake-up call before they made such foolish choices. Our shared laughter lightened the moment, a rare respite in the midst of turmoil. Even amidst the gravity of my situation, I found a flicker of resilience. People can grieve at funerals yet still find laughter. Similarly, in the painful process of divorce, there can exist moments of lightness. I turned to Sam and expressed my gratitude, saying, "Thanks, Sam, I really needed that." She simply nodded, her understanding evident. After our brief respite, we returned to Richard's office around 1 p.m. to continue the meeting with Kelly. Before I posed my next question, I felt it necessary to remind her of the seriousness of this moment. I stressed the importance of her answering truthfully. Lying in any form would end our meeting and potentially extinguish any hope for our marriage. "Do you understand?" I asked pointedly. Kelly said yes, her voice steady, indicating she was prepared to tell the truth. I took a deep breath and asked her the pivotal question, From the day we were married until now, had she ever cheated on me? In that moment, tears began to flood her eyes, and my heart ached for her. I could see this was deeply painful for her to confront, but I couldn't offer consolation or allow her to evade the gravity of the situation. I needed her to care enough about our marriage to reveal everything. Then came her confession, punctuated by regret. "Yes, Jack, I did cheat on you. I'm so sorry," she said, the finality of her words hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. "Jack, can you ever forgive me?" With the gravity of her admission sinking in, I decided to ask Richard and David to leave the room. I had more probing questions for Kelly, and I wanted to protect her from potential embarrassment in front of them. They expressed concern, but I insisted, and Kelly nodded in agreement, signaling she wanted them to step out as well. I had recorded her confession, which would suffice for a divorce hearing if it came to that. However, I didn't want the remainder of our conversation documented, so I turned off the recording device. I proceeded to ask her the essential questions: when, where, who, and why. She sniffled a few times, and her sorrow was palpable. "Oh Jack, I'm so sorry," she said, the remorse evident in her voice. "It happened this weekend at PPA. I cheated with one of the Mauers named Mario. I can't explain why it happened, I guess it was just a moment of passion. Amber and I had been having a great day, and after a wonderful dinner, we both decided to get a massage before going to bed." Kelly opened up to me about her experience with her masseuse, Mario. She described being on the massage table, lying face down, feeling relaxed as he began to work on her muscles. She mentioned how his hands felt both soft and strong, a combination that made her feel at ease. In that moment, she let herself go, not realizing the extent to which things would eventually escalate. As she recounted this, tears began to stream down her face, and she expressed her regret, saying, "Oh Jack, if I could go back, I never would have allowed it, and we wouldn't be where we are now." Her admission struck a deep chord within me, and I found myself in a state of shock. I managed to respond with, "Even though this is shocking, Kelly, I am so sorry and I don't know what to say, but please forgive me," hoping to soothe the situation. Her silence was heavy as she looked down, sniffling as grief washed over her. After a tense pause, she lifted her head and locked eyes with me, her expression questioning. "Jack, is there any hope that you will forgive me?" she asked. Wanting to get to the bottom of the situation, I pressed her for absolute honesty, asking, "Is this the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Kelly's face showed signs of confusion, as if she was grappling with her own thoughts on how much I actually knew. Finally, she responded, "Yes, Jack, that is what happened. I am so sorry." Hearing her confession was a blow to my heart, yet somehow, I managed to keep my composure despite the pain of her betrayal and my mounting anger over her deceit. I stood up from where I had been sitting, signaling for David and Richard to re-enter the room. Looking at both men with a sense of finality, I stated, "This meeting is over." My mind was racing with thoughts of the current chaos in my life. Earlier, I had received an update about a robbery at my house. Although the detective had found signs of a break-in, there was uncertainty regarding what had been stolen. Feeling overwhelmed, I walked toward the door but paused to confront Kelly once more. "Kelly, I'm filing for divorce based on infidelity, and the terms of our prenuptial agreement will be upheld," I declared. Her face went pale with shock. "But why, Jack? I confess to my infidelity. I'm begging you to forgive me and keep our marriage intact. Please, Jack, I love you so much. Please forgive me." I felt a flood of emotions as I responded, "Kelly, you lied to me. You didn't care enough about our marriage to be completely honest. If you had been truthful from the beginning, I might have considered giving it a chance. But you didn't even give us that opportunity. You chose to deceive me when you had the chance to come clean. I know you were unfaithful more than just that one time with Mario, and I have the evidence to prove it. You were warned, and you didn't care enough about me or our marriage. It's over." Turning my back on her, I opened the door and began to walk away. Suddenly, Kelly's voice pierced through the air as she screamed, "Wait, Jack. I'll tell you everything. Everything you want to know. Please don't leave me." Her frantic plea made me turn around once more, filled with a mix of hurt and anger. "You had your chance, Kelly," I shouted back, "and you thought you could get away with only admitting to one incident. You lied to me, and now it's too late." David quickly followed me, catching up as I made my way to my car. He grabbed my arm, a look of concern on his face. "Do you really want to file for infidelity?" he asked. I confirmed with a heavy heart, yes, I do. She had her chance. I must have misjudged her all these years. I wanted her to care enough to confess everything, but she couldn't even be honest with me. Now, go ahead and file. Upon arriving at what was now my house, I grabbed a couple of beers from the refrigerator, the cold bottles offering a momentary escape from the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. I settled into my office, quickly downing the first beer and then sipping the second as I reflected on the whirlwind of events. I had several hidden copies of the video recordings, kept in secure spots, but with her confession, I didn't think I would need to make them public. My thoughts were interrupted when I jolted up, realizing I had left the tape in the office. In a rush, I called David, frantically asking, "Hey, it's Jack. Did you grab the tape recording of Kelly's confession before you followed me?" His response was a punch to the gut. "Oh no, I forgot the tape, Jack. I rushed out after you and completely forgot about it." The reality of the situation settled in, leaving me feeling even more unsettled as I considered what lay ahead. "I deeply regret what happened, Jack. I had gone to great lengths to meticulously plan everything, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. Yet, in a moment fueled by hurt and anger, I ended up making a critical mistake by storming out without taking the tape with me. In my frustration, I suggested to David that he should give Richard a call to see if there was a way to go to his place and retrieve it. However, I had a sinking feeling that Richard might respond with something along the lines of, "We figured you had everything you needed when you left, so we erased everything. Sorry." Honestly, I would be shocked if David could actually retrieve it. But even if he couldn't, I reassured him that I had amassed enough evidence to file for infidelity regardless of the outcome. David's response was one of understanding, expressing his sorrow for the predicament. He knew how much I wanted to avoid the necessity of downloading the video, but now it seemed that might indeed be my only option if she decided to contest the charge of infidelity. I reassured him once more that everything was going to be fine. After I ended the call, I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I grabbed another beer from the refrigerator, a small comfort in a turbulent time. I found myself reflecting on how careless I had been in my actions. My head was not quite clear, but the numbness that enveloped me was overwhelming as I sat watching the evening news. Before heading to bed, I thought I heard a vehicle pulling into the yard. Curiosity piqued, I slowly rose from my chair and walked to the back door, stepping onto the porch. In that dim light, a dark shape caught my attention just before everything went black. Suddenly, a force struck me on the back of the head, and I was engulfed in a blinding light, leading me to drift into absolute darkness. When consciousness began to return, I heard a beeping sound in the background. I opened my eyes, trying to survey my surroundings without moving, a lesson learned from the last time I found myself in such a situation. A nurse was sitting by my side. "Hi Jack, I'm Susan, and I'm your nurse. Please, don't try to move. Everything is going to be okay, and I will explain everything to you, but it's important that you remain still. Do you understand?" I felt something in my throat, and although I could only manage a slight nod, I hoped it conveyed my understanding. "Jack, I need to inform the doctor that you've regained consciousness." "I'll be right back," she said before leaving the room. I lay there, eyes closed, grappling with the realization that I must have been injured and was likely in a hospital, yet the circumstances of my injury were shrouded in confusion. I assumed that eventually, someone would fill me in on what had happened. Not long after, I sensed the arrival of someone else in the room. "Mr. Hagen, or Jack," a voice acknowledged. "I am Dr. Julius. You have sustained multiple injuries due to a beating sustained during a home invasion. Now that you are awake, I am quite confident you will recover, but we had to restrain you to prevent further injury from unexpected movements. I assume you felt significant pain when you attempted to move yesterday, correct?" I managed a slight smile, nodding to affirm the pain that coursed through my body. "We should have acted sooner regarding the restraints to spare you that discomfort, and I sincerely apologize for that. Nurse Johnson, I believe we can remove the restraints now," he continued. "But Mr. Hagen, please refrain from any independent movements for the time being." I nodded in acknowledgement and gestured toward the tube in my throat. "We can also remove the ventilator now. Nurse Johnson will see to that." As the restraints were taken off and the tube was removed, a sharp pain shot through my throat. Speaking was initially impossible, but after a while, I was offered a sip of water, and though my voice was raspy and painful, I managed to whisper, "Could someone please tell me what happened to me?" "Jack, it's 7 a.m. You've just regained consciousness and been taken off the ventilator. Your throat will remain sore for some time, and for now, we'd like you to focus on resting. Nurse Johnson will be here with you, and after some time to recover, we'll contact the police to inform them you're ready to talk. They can provide you with all the details regarding the incident, Dr. Julius explained. Medically, you have some injuries, but the EMTs responded quickly and were able to reinflate your lung. To be straightforward, you have been physically assaulted. We will monitor your condition closely for a few more days, and then you should be ready for discharge. Thus began a long day of rest, with Nurse Johnson by my side, ensuring that I was comfortable and attended to, as the reality of my situation began to set in. By later that afternoon, I found myself in a position where I could sit up with considerable help. Getting to the restroom had become manageable, thanks to the assistance I received. During that time, I had the pleasure of chatting with Nurse Susan Johnson, who was caring for me. To my surprise, I discovered that we shared a connection from years past. She had been a schoolmate of mine, albeit 3 years my junior. Back in those days, she was known as Susan Fisk. However, life had taken its course, and she had married Chad Johnson, with whom she had a delightful 3-year-old daughter named Emily. It turned out that she had also experienced the heartache of infidelity, as Chad had been unfaithful to her, which ultimately led to their divorce. During our conversation, I felt comfortable sharing my own struggles regarding my wife Kelly, and Susan listened with genuine understanding. The next morning, I was greeted bright and early by 2 police detectives, Harold Robbins and Josh Carter. Before they could dive deeply into their line of questioning, I requested a brief overview of the events that had transpired. Detective Robbins explained the situation with clarity, stating that it appeared I had been the victim of a robbery that escalated into an attack. He mentioned that they had found a 2x4 on my porch, near where I had been found, and it had traces of both my hair and blood. They noted the absence of fingerprints on the piece of wood, leading them to conclude that whoever had used it was wearing gloves. Additionally, the detectives informed me that the front door of my house showed no signs of forced entry, likely because I had stepped out onto the porch and left the door open. As the detectives continued, they revealed that their search of my home had uncovered several pictures removed from the walls, an empty strongbox tucked away in one of the desk drawers, and signs of rummaging through the filing cabinets in my office. The bedrooms were not spared either. They had been thoroughly searched, with drawers opened and closets emptied. Even the jewelry box in the master bedroom showed evidence of disturbance, with several compartments found empty. While all the signs pointed to a robbery, the detectives could not determine what exactly had been taken. Detective Carter added that once I was able to return home, I would need to conduct my own assessment of my belongings in order to identify what was missing. The doctor had indicated that it might take another 3 to 4 days before I would be ready to go home. After that, the detectives would reconnect with me to review the situation and update their reports accordingly. Detective Robbins then shifted his focus to the questions he needed to ask. He inquired about my recollection of the attack and the events that had unfolded afterward. I admitted to them that my memory was quite foggy. I had enjoyed a few beers while watching the evening news when I suddenly heard a vehicle pull into my yard. Out of curiosity, I stood up to investigate, stepped out onto the porch, and that was when I caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. Just before everything went black, I couldn't recall seeing or hearing anything else until I woke up yesterday. I lamented to the detectives that I was afraid I wouldn't be of much help in identifying who had attacked me. Detective Robbins expressed the necessity to ask further questions that could aid in their investigation, particularly regarding my wife's whereabouts during the incident. I explained to him that my wife and I were separated and amid a contentious divorce, which left me ill-informed about her current location. The detective then asked if he could refer to me as Jack, and I consented. He probed into the progress of the divorce proceedings, curious about whether there was significant conflict between us. I relayed that things were not going smoothly. She was contesting the grounds on which I planned to file for the divorce. When he pressed for details on the grounds, I explained that I intended to cite infidelity, knowing well that it would reduce her settlement under those conditions, which she was actively disputing. Detective Robbins pointed out that this situation could potentially provide her with a motive for the attack. I quickly interjected my disbelief, insisting that I just couldn't imagine her ever doing something to harm me. He reassured me that they would be examining all angles carefully as part of their investigation. Then, he shifted his focus, asking if there might be any other individuals who could harbor motives to harm me and whether I had any disputes with neighbors, friends, family, or anyone else. I struggled to come up with an answer, responding honestly that I couldn't think of anyone. The detectives discussed the necessity of conducting a thorough inventory of what was missing once I regained my strength. They were particularly interested in whether there had been any cash in the house, especially in the strongbox, and if so, how much. They also asked if there were any valuable items, such as jewelry or artwork, that might have been worth thousands of dollars or more, emphasizing the need to gather as much information as possible. I confirmed to them that there was indeed a sum of cash stored away in the strongbox, and upon estimating, I estimated it was approximately $8,000. Typically, I kept around $100 in cash readily available for small purchases or emergencies, but after having used some of it recently, it was reasonable to conclude that the amount remaining was close to $8,000. Alongside the cash, there were several nice pieces of jewelry, but none of them were valued over $1,000. At that moment, I couldn't recall anything else of significant worth that might be of interest. However, I made a conscious decision not to mention the hidden safe that was cleverly concealed behind the bookcase. The detective hadn't brought it up yet, and I felt fairly confident that no one else had discovered its existence. Keeping that information under wraps was important to me. The detective, clearly wrapping up our conversation, informed me, "Well, Jack, I think that's all for today. If you remember anything else, please don't hesitate to call me. When you're ready to return home, let us know so we can conduct an inventory. If more questions arise, we'll either visit you here or at your home in the next few days." Over the next 4 days, I gradually began to heal. I took plenty of naps, and there were moments when I would sit and chat with Susan, finding comfort in her presence. I had several visitors during this time as well, including Wally, Amber, David, and Sam. Notably, Kelly did not come to see me, and aside from Amber, none of her family chose to visit either. Given the circumstances surrounding my injury, this was understandable, but I would have greatly appreciated their company. Richard Kelly's attorney did come to see me, and I found solace in the fact that we had been friends for many years before my divorce proceedings began. His visit provided a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. Everyone who came expressed their sympathy for my condition and wished me a swift recovery. Both Amber and Sam gave me a gentle kiss on the cheek as they were leaving, and I could see tears forming in their eyes, which deeply affected me. Those 4 days were quite challenging, even though I managed to get some sleep. Unfortunately, my dreams were often unsettling. There were times when I would wake up in a state of panic, my heart racing, and tears streaming down my face. On a few occasions, I even woke up disoriented, not entirely sure of my surroundings. Yet, it seemed like Susan was always there, offering her gentle words and comforting touches, providing me with reassurance during those tense moments. I even remember waking myself up with a scream one night, though I couldn't bring to mind the details of the frightening dreams that plagued me. Eventually, I learned that Susan stayed at the hospital with me even when her shifts ended. She would only leave to freshen up and change her clothes each day. She later told me that her decision to remain by my side stemmed from the difficulties I was facing in my marriage, and she wanted to offer her support. I genuinely appreciated her dedication and kindness during such a turbulent time in my life. Dr. Julius came to see me with the good news that I would be discharged soon. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, prompting me to quickly prepare for my departure. Susan assisted me in getting ready, and she accompanied me downstairs, wheeling me to the lobby where Wally and Amber were waiting to take me home. As we said our goodbyes, Susan wished me luck and enveloped me in a warm hug. It was clear that she cared about my well-being, but with my life in such turmoil due to my marital issues and health problems, I chose not to pursue anything more than friendship with her. I mentioned that I might call her in the future, and that was the extent of our discussion. Upon entering my home, I was immediately struck by the disarray that lingered. Wally and Amber offered to help me tidy up the place, but I declined their offer, expressing my desire to leave things as they were for the time being until I had the chance to sift through everything. I assured them I would reach out when I was ready for assistance, and after some reluctance, they agreed to leave me alone. My first order of business was to examine the hidden safe behind the bookcase in my office. To my great relief, everything was intact. The safe contained a significant amount of cash, certificates of deposit, stocks, bonds, and a DVD that held evidence of Kelly's infidelity. It was clear that the safe had not been discovered, as anyone who had found it would have surely taken these valuables. I continued to inspect the rest of the office and observed that aside from the cash, my laptop and a few numbered prints of Wildlife by Terry Reedon were still present. However, I did notice that bank statements and credit card statements were laid out on the desk. Taking precautionary measures, I promptly alerted my bank and credit card companies to monitor for any unusual activity over the following weeks. The investigation into the robbery and assault was progressing slowly. The police were struggling to gather any substantial evidence that could help identify a suspect. Detectives Robbins and Carter kept me updated on their efforts, but unfortunately, no new leads had emerged. The detectives explained that the investigation was running into challenges primarily due to the lack of high-value items taken during the robbery. They indicated that tracking down potential suspects through known fences in the area was proving to be a dead end. In their last update, they hinted that unless significant evidence came to light, the case could be set aside for the time being. At the outset of their inquiry, they had asked me questions about Kelly, and I had made sure to be cooperative and open with my responses. I firmly believed in Kelly's character and couldn't fathom her wanting to harm me or steal items that she would easily obtain through the divorce settlement. It seemed like the detectives shared this viewpoint as their investigations into Kelly failed to yield any substantial leads. Given my concerns about my financial security, I took proactive measures by opening new bank accounts and ordering fresh checks. This decision arose from worries that my previous accounts might have been compromised during the incident. Fortunately, I had kept meticulous records, allowing me to account for all transactions on my old accounts, but the peace of mind that came with new accounts was undeniable. I also decided it was time for an upgrade in technology. I purchased a new laptop and reorganized my office to create a conducive environment to return to my professional duties. While managing my administrative tasks, I sat down to tackle some overdue bills and stumbled upon an invoice from Red SS Inc. Suddenly, it struck me that REDSS stood for Remote Electronic Data Storage Solutions. I recalled that I had video surveillance set up around my property, covering various areas including the house, grain bins, and machine shed. Each night, this footage was automatically sent to my grain office computer and subsequently uploaded to Red SS for backup. I had been paying a monthly fee based on the volume of data they stored. Usually, I would delete the oldest footage each month to manage costs, but since the robbery, I had neglected to do so. My realization was profound. I had a potential source of video evidence that could be crucial for the investigation. I logged into Red SS website without any hesitation, navigated to the archives, and selected the day that the robbery occurred. My intention was to download the entire day's footage onto my laptop for review. The goal was clear. I hoped the video quality would be adequate enough to help identify the individuals who had invaded my property and stolen from me. If the footage met my expectations, I planned to create a copy on a DVD and deliver it to Detectives Robbins and Carter to reignite their investigation. As I sifted through the footage, however, I began to feel a sense of disappointment. It became increasingly clear that there was nothing of significant value captured on the video, which led me to worry that the detectives might struggle to solve the case without any solid leads. With my bills settled and my finances in order, I began to chart my path forward. One of the first steps I took was reaching out to an old college friend who worked at Cargill, one of the largest grain merchandisers in the United States. Through this connection, I was able to secure a meeting with key figures in their acquisitions department. It was remarkable how personal connections could facilitate opportunities in business. After about 2 weeks of planning with Cargill, I decided to take a brief trip to Las Vegas. I flew to Phoenix for some business matters before returning home to implement my plans. I contacted David to coordinate a meeting with Kelly and her brothers, Tom and Carl, as well as her sister, Amber, at Gentry Grain. I instructed him to mention that, with the divorce looming, the state's grain reserves could potentially be at risk due to my grain storage situation. I wanted to address these concerns directly and find a resolution that would work for everyone involved. David's message seemed to catch them off guard, but they quickly agreed to the meeting, perhaps realizing they hadn't fully considered the ramifications of my grain no longer being included in the reserves. When I entered the office, I greeted everyone with a simple hello and addressed Tom, Carl, Amber, and Kelly. I started the meeting by stating one of the reasons I felt it was necessary for us to come together to resolve some pressing issues. Tom opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to interrupt, asserting that I had initiated this meeting, so it was best if they listened to what I had to say before jumping in with comments. I truly believed that this approach would serve everyone's best interests. I then turned my attention to the divorce proceedings. With an air of seriousness, I apologized to Kelly and placed the final draft of the divorce papers on the table in front of her, clearly signaling my intentions. I requested, "Please sign these." In response, she looked at me and said, "Jack, I don't want a divorce. Whatever you believe I did, it does not justify the decision to throw away all the good years we have shared together. It is disheartening to think that our memories could be overshadowed by this. I truly wish you could find a way to forgive me and we could work through our issues, rather than allowing this to escalate, especially not here in front of my brothers and sister." We need to bring this matter to a close. It has become painfully clear that there is no future left for our marriage, and I believe that the sooner you sign these divorce papers, the sooner we both can begin to move forward with our lives." As I spoke, I noticed a flush creeping across her cheeks, and she took a moment before responding, indicating her lingering feelings about the situation. "Well, if you are so insistent on going through with this divorce," she replied, "I still plan to contest the infidelity issue. That is the least you can do for me." Her words didn't surprise me. I had anticipated that she would bring up this argument. I had come prepared for this very possibility. "If you decide to fight me on the infidelity allegation, Kelly," I said firmly, "I will have no choice but to present this DVD as evidence in court." I placed the DVD on the table alongside the divorce papers for everyone to see. This video documents all 8 occasions where she had been unfaithful to me at the spa. In that instant, I noticed Amber's face turn crimson, and her eyes filled with disbelief and disappointment. She shot a glare at Kelly, clearly unimpressed by her actions. I felt compelled to clarify the situation, adding that Kelly had intentionally avoided Mario and Steven during our marriage, and I reiterated that I possessed video evidence of her doing so, which would decisively resolve the infidelity issue once it reached the court. I gave her an ultimatum: either sign the divorce papers now, or prepare for a legal battle. I made it abundantly clear that I was no longer willing to engage in any further games or avoidances. The reaction from Tom and Carl mirrored my own feelings of shock, while Amber remained silent, tears streaming down her cheeks. After a tense moment, Kelly ultimately signed the divorce papers, and I made sure to leave her a copy before placing the rest into my briefcase. She appeared numb, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she processed the sudden and distressing evidence of her infidelity. Turning the conversation toward the grain situation, I recognized the gravity of the moment and addressed the group, acknowledging their visible shock while promising to keep my explanation brief. I explained that due to the divorce, they would no longer be able to count on the value of my stored grain as part of their reserves. This would put them in violation of the grain license and loan agreements that we had previously established. However, there was a silver lining. I informed them of my recent acquisition of their father's 52% stake in the business, emphasizing that the absence of a first right of refusal clause in his agreement made the transaction relatively uncomplicated. Their father, aware of the company's pressing need for my equity and my evidence of Kelly's infidelity, found it necessary to proceed with the sale. As a result, I had now become the majority shareholder in Gentry Grain Incorporated, while they each held a 12% stake, placing them in the minority with a total of 48%. I made it clear that I had already negotiated a deal to sell my controlling interest in Gentry Grain to Cargill, a company always on the lookout for promising grain operations. I extended an option to each of them to sell their shares at the same price I had negotiated, which I considered to be a favorable opportunity. However, I also pointed out the drawback that their company was now under new ownership, and the new management would be evaluating personnel contributions. As part of my negotiation, I was able to secure them a guarantee of job security for 1 year, an offer I encouraged them to take seriously. They needed to work hard during that time to demonstrate their value and contributions to the company. Furthermore, I disclosed that I had sold my farm along with Wally's farm to Cargill, with Wally entering into a long-term management contract for both properties given his exceptional performance. The expressions on their faces shifted from shock to a mix of frustration and anger. Tom, being the eldest and the unofficial leader of the Gentry family, was the first to voice his outrage. "What on earth have you done, Jack? You've ruined this family business because my sister cheated on you. What kind of man are you anyway? How did you convince my father to sell you his shares? What lies did you tell him?" His questions echoed the frustration in the room. "Let me clarify, Tom," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "Your father sold me his shares to ensure that you, Carl, and Kelly would avoid any legal repercussions. Instead of questioning my character, perhaps you should consider what kind of individuals you are dealing with, your own siblings." I placed the second DVD in front of them, hoping it would serve as a wake-up call. This video will provide all the answers you seek regarding the troubling circumstances that have unfolded. It unmistakably captures your pickup truck parked in my yard on the night I was assaulted, and it clearly shows both you and Carl assaulting me. The footage does not lie, it vividly illustrates you leaving my home with my belongings in hand. Consider yourselves fortunate that I have chosen to handle this matter on my own terms, opting for a path of vengeance instead of turning it over to Detectives Robbins and Carter, which could have led to severe consequences for all involved. In the midst of this emotional storm, Kelly finally found her voice, expressing her dismay over my actions and the situation as a whole. I responded by emphasizing how our circumstances were different, how I felt I had invested my entire life into our friendship, only to feel betrayed. I laid bare my feelings about how her family had treated me and how Kelly, despite being my closest friend, often carried an air of superiority that was hard to swallow. I confronted her with the painful truth of her deceit, reminding her of the promise she made to be faithful to me. How could I forget that she had so easily crossed that line with Larry Evandale? Her unfaithfulness was not just a personal betrayal, it was a blatant disrespect toward our marriage and the bond we had once shared. I went further, letting her know that I had seen everything captured in that video, even hearing every word exchanged during the assault. This revelation was more than just a reminder, it was a confrontation that revealed the depth of her betrayal. I pointed out how her actions had almost cost me my life, illustrating just how terrible a friend she had been during our darkest moment. The weight of this accusation hung heavily in the air, and to my surprise, Kelly fainted, her body giving way as she struggled to process the reality of what I was saying. Amber and Carl rushed to her side, catching her before she hit the ground, a scene filled with chaotic urgency. Once she regained consciousness, I delivered my final, crushing blow. I revealed a harsh truth, the fact that her father had sold me his shares in an attempt to keep all three of them out of jail. It was a secret that stung, and I made it clear that he didn't hold much pride in his children, with the exception of Amber. I hinted that this lack of pride was something she would eventually hear about in the future. As I laid this all out, I reiterated my belief that I had wasted a significant part of my life on Kelly, but I firmly resolved that I would not waste any more of my future on her. After wishing her a wonderful life, I turned and left the room, feeling a sense of closure as I concluded all negotiations. It was a moment of liberation, and I felt ready to move forward, exactly what I intended to do from that point onward.